At that point in time, the case we wanted to contrast this with is a guy named William Ramel. And this is from a 1980 Supreme Court case. But Ramel was kind of a small-time loser. He was convicted of a credit card fraud of $80. He was later convicted of a forged check in the amount of $28.36. And then some point later, he took $120 and said he'd come back to fix an air conditioner, and he never did. Texas charged him as a recidivist criminal, 3 strikes and you're out, and locked him up for the rest of his life. He appealed to the Supreme Court and said, this is cruel and unusual punishment. Specifically, this is disproportionate to my offense. And Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote for the court upholding the sentence, saying that with repeat criminals, the state has an interest in making sure that they are not free to prey on citizens. If you can't conform your behavior to the dictates of law, there's very good policy reasons to lock you up for an extended period of time. For the dissent, one of the justices noted that it was hard to find 3 felonies that less endangered the peace of the state than the 3 done by Ramel. None of them involved force. All of them involved small amounts of money. All told, we're talking about $225. And he gets life imprisonment. So that was kind of just to start off that chapter. And I guess this is kind of the current version of it. If we get a chance to do the second edition of the book, we'll probably start off now with Ken Lay and this other case I'm talking about. So let's take a quick peek at Ken Lay. He was actually the founder of Enron. And one day during Enron's collapse, he had a meeting with stock analysts in the morning, and he told them that we're not hiding anything. Everything is fine here at Enron. Just kind of keep giving us good ratings, but good company, good quarter, nothing to worry about. There was lots of rumblings at this time that something was going wrong. The stock price was falling. So he had a conference with his employees, and he decided to take questions from people on cards, and he'd read them aloud and answer them. And this is one of my favorite quotes. This woman wrote to him and said, "I'd like to know if you're on crack. If so, that would explain a lot. If not, you may want to start because it's going to be a long time before we trust you again." We know that day, even as he was telling employees that everything was okay with Enron, that the stock was fine and they should buy more, he cashed out $17 million. There's this little system that's kind of called Ken's ATM, but he would go and withdraw money from the company and pay it back weeks or months later with stock. So anytime he wanted some cash, he could just kind of go and say, here's some stock that I have, and I'm going to get cash now. I think I have a $300 or $500 limit on my ATM, depending where I go. I'll probably never see $1 million in my lifetime, but here's Ken in one day saying, 17 million, thank you very much. All told, he cashed $102 million out of Enron shares. So when you hear that he still has lots of worthless Enron shares, that's true. He has a couple million shares that are now worth not very much. But don't let that distract you from before this point. He certainly made out. The $102 million is shares. That's not salary. That's not bonuses. That's not all the perks that go with being the world's coolest company, as they like to think of themselves. Enron ended up declaring the largest corporate bankruptcy in U.S. history up to that point. WorldCom came along a little bit later and became the biggest one up to that point. But Enron was the biggest at that point. And a lot of employees, 20,000's worth, 20,000 employees had a lot of their savings, retirement wrapped up in Enron stock. A lot of other states had money invested in Enron stock because it was doing so well. One of the writers of Fortune magazine, which I'll be mentioning a lot, noted that in this age of the 401k, when retirement dreams of many Americans are tied to the integrity of the stock market, crooks in the corner office are everybody's problem. And we also find here a lot of families that had invested in Enron were counting on that money for college tuition and lots of other things that just now aren't happening. A special committee of Enron's board found a systematic and pervasive attempt by Enron's management to misrepresent the company's financial institution. We find that Enron colluded to manipulate the power crisis for their own benefit. I've just been reading a book called The Smartest Guys in the Room. by a couple of Fortune writers about Enron, and they talk about all of the various scams that Enron was running on California. A lot of the deregulation is complicated, but there's only so much power you could move through the lines. So Enron would pay people to relieve congestion and siphon off some of that power and divert it elsewhere if there was too much schedule to go through on any day. Enron figured out how they could kind of put in orders using one branch of the company to create congestion on the line, and then on another part of the company, relieve the congestion and get paid for it. So this is a pretty good trick. We create fictitious congestion that we then get paid to relieve. They had lots of other scams where they would take power out of California at a low price and route it around and bring it back in at a higher price, making California consumers and businesses pay a lot more for the same energy if it had been produced locally and just shipped around locally. There's any number of these scams that they did over time. We also find a long history of punishing whistleblowers. Everyone in Enron seems to have been part of a culture of arrogance. The smartest guys in the room is a very well chosen title, because the picture that comes through is basically arrogant son of bitches who are just really greedy, out for themselves, and thought everybody else was too stupid to catch them. We find Ken Lay at the top of this. He is the person who founded this company. He's the one with political connections. He's trying to make a go of this company and supposedly in charge. We find that he hasn't been indicted, as I said. We haven't had his assets frozen. Forbes magazine said, if President Bush really wants to make the case that the administration will not tolerate corporate wrongdoing, what better way to indict his old friend and former CEO, Ken Lay? That was actually July 2002, and we still haven't got very far with that. We find actually at the time they wrote this rather than a vigorous investigation. The Bush administration was pursuing Operation Pipe Dream. This was an operation which resulted in 50 indictments of drug paraphernalia sellers. So we did manage to kind of put off Enron for a little while, but we got the guy behind pipesforyou.com, 420smile.com, and lots of other sites that sell bongs and pipes and stuff like that. So we have a good sense of administration priorities. It does seem like part of the problem here is that Ken Lay didn't know a lot. He didn't seem to use email, which is kind of interesting for somebody in that position. He refused to sign lots of documents. Things would pile up in his desk and he may or may not look at them, but he would never sign off on anything. He would tell you that it was okay, but no paper trail. Lots of people offered him reports after meetings. You're sitting across the table and you would slide a copy of your report to somebody, and he would just turn it down or he would leave it sitting there and walk out of the room. So it's possible in a sense that he might not have known what was going on. It seems also like he didn't want to know lots of stuff that was going on. But this really raises the question of what it is you're getting paid millions of dollars to do exactly if you're not really responsible for how the company runs. Obviously, it's shared by the CEO and the chief financial officer and lots of other people. But as somebody who is the chair, the president of the company, you would expect a little bit more of a clue. This is also odd because we have lots of asset forfeiture laws which apply to drugs and prostitution, and we don't necessarily care if people knew. If you're living in a house with somebody who is dealing drugs and they get caught and the DEA, the police think that the house was integral to the drug operation, they can seize it and sell it. We've had cases now where we start to do seizure of cars for prostitution. So we've had guys borrow their girlfriend's car without their knowledge, go and pick up a prostitute, get caught, and get their wife's car taken. Now obviously she didn't know, she didn't approve of this, but we are willing, as a matter of public policy, to say this car has been used in crime, we're going to take it, it's now the government's, we're going to sell it off and make money off of this. Yet Ken Lay over here can kind of say, well, I didn't know, I didn't get that email, I didn't sign that, even though he has people below him who have been indicted. We have a dozen people or so in the top of Enron who have been indicted, but somehow we don't connect this with being a criminal organization, and we don't ask that his assets are seized.